Action fanatics, welcome to another edition of the Bulletproof Podcast. Chris the Brain and Chad Cruz with you. And Chad, sometimes we have special guests on this show, but today we have a very special guest.
We do indeed, and we like to think that we have experts that come on the show and teach us a thing or two, as well as the listeners. But today we may have the expert on one of the most important topics we may ever discuss on this podcast.
Yeah, we are talking about Austin Trunick, the author of Canon Film Guide, Volume 1 and 2. Austin, welcome to the Bulletproof Podcast.
Thank you. That was a heck of an introduction. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You know, sometimes my old pro wrestling background comes in and I can really hype somebody up. But you deserve that hype. You will believe the hype, people, after we're through with this. Because, you know, Chad, you and I, you know, we kind of owe Canon Films for starting our website and starting our podcast, because I don't think if we weren't both Canon Film fans, that these things would even exist.
Right. You know, Canon Films is kind of like that foundational thing for this site where, you know, our love of action films kind of grew from that. And the roots run deep in from Bulletproof Action into Canon. And anytime we can talk about Canon, I mean, how many times have we talked about Canon Films on?
Not enough.
Podcast? Yeah, well, there you go. Not enough, but there's always room for more.
But yeah, so we made a website, we did a podcast, but Austin, you took your love of Canon to a whole different level. How did you come up with, was this something that, did you have an epiphany one night? How did this come about that you have written these amazing books, these thorough books, detailed? I mean, these are like they're like my Encyclopedia Britannicas basically right now. I turn to them at all times.
Some people might call it an unhealthy obsession that I have, but no, I think I probably have similar background to the both of you. I kind of came of age in this sort of glory era of action. I remember it as the video store era. I saw a lot of these movies for the first time on VHS, renting them with my father back in the late 80s and into the early 90s. And yeah, I'd been writing about film and interviewing people for magazines. I'd been a freelance writer for a long time, but I was really I spent a lot of time trying to think of a project that I would really keep me occupied, keep me interested, but was also near and dear to my heart. And it kept coming back to Canon. This was the company that made the movies that made me fall in love with movies. This was that started the addiction, started the wanting to, you know, go to the store and learning an actor or learning a director and wanting to see what else they did and remembering faces and names and associating with each other, that's where my love of movies began as a kid. So when the Canon Film Guide, that idea started coming together, it was purely because I was going back to the movies that made me fall in love with just the medium of film.
Yeah, we could definitely relate to that. And you've even gone to like locations that the Canon films had been done in. I know you even went to the original like Death Wish where Paul Kersey first was killing thugs and muggers.
Yeah, those are some of my favorite. That's one of my favorite things to do. And unfortunately, a lot of these locations are in places that are accessible. Someday I'll head to South Africa or the Philippines to see where some of these American Ninja and Missing in Action movies were filmed, but that'll be in the future. But right now, it's something that, you know, I try to plan it into trips if we're going somewhere close, much to my wife and children's chagrin most of the time. The Death Wish locations, when I was in New York, I was visiting with my sister, so she actually is the one that took all the photos that I've posted of myself standing on the Death Wish steps and things like that. And she was very understanding. she was a sport about looking at them like, this is the shot from the movies or this shot from the poster. Can you try to frame it the same way? And I have a lot of fun doing that sort of thing.
I could see Brain visiting the Blind Beggar bar fight.
Oh yeah, that'd
location
be awesome.
And really loving that place.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And I'm glad you have enablers in your life, Austin, because everybody needs some of those.
Mm-hmm. They are, yeah, definitely enablers is a good way to put it. They are, they're supportive. They're very supportive. A lot of people
Well,
appreciate it.
I want to test some of your knowledge. Maybe you can help. One of our readers left us a comment on bulletproofaction.com, and we certainly encourage anybody who checks out the site and reads the various articles that we've posted over the nearly 8 years we've been in business. Feel free to leave us a comment. But Major had a question, and I said, well, this is perfect timing, because if anybody would know this answer, it would be you. We're talking Death Wish 3, the famous scene at the beginning where Paul Kersey is arrested unjustly for killing Charlie. He didn't kill Charlie. He didn't kill him at all. But anyway, he's in the holding cell. There's a big bald guy who tore the toilet out for reasons nobody understands and ends up with his head between the bars. Do you know who that guy is?
Unfortunately, I do not know his name. I can picture him. He's got that great
tattoo.
spider web tattoo on his head, and he's scary looking, and he only has that very brief one line and gets his head jammed through the bars. But sadly, I do not know his name. Maybe Paul Talbot would be somebody who...
That's true too. We can reach out to Paul. Yeah,
that would be my first instinct, is to email Paul, because if Paul doesn't know something about a Charles Bronson movie, it's knowledge that's lost to time.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I will reach out to Paul. Sorry, Major, we tried with.
I'm sorry.
But we'll try with Paul Talbot, of course, who did the Bronson's Loose books. Also, you listeners could really fill out your library just listening to this podcast. Chad, we're encouraging reading.
We are.
Reading is fundamental.
Yeah, it's good every once in a while to pick up a book. Sometimes I set my beer on top of a book.
Yeah.
But, so it's a little higher. The ergonomics are better, but it's also good to read them at times. Yeah,
I've got about 10 pages into a book that I was reading. And then I got Austin's book, and I started, that just overtook it with the Canon Film Guide. So, and that again that's available right now, Volume 1 and 2 now available, of course, on Amazon. And I think on Bear Manor Media as well. Isn't that correct, Austin?
That is correct. Yeah, and even through local bookstores, if you're lucky enough to still live near one, they can order it for you. So there's a lot of places to get it now, which is pretty awesome.
Ohio, DraftKings Sportsbook is coming. To celebrate, all new customers will receive $200 in free bets. Plus, 5 lucky customers will win a $100,000 free bet. That's right. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you $200 in free bets just for signing up today. No deposit required. Plus, you'll be entered to win a $100,000 free bet when you sign up. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up with code DKPodcastOH to get $200 in free bets to use once mobile sports betting hits Ohio. Plus, 5 customers will win a $100,000 free bet. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code DKPodcastOH. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-589-9966. 21 and over. Physically present in Ohio. Eligibility restrictions apply. See terms at DraftKings.com/sportsbook. Subject to regulatory licensing requirements. 1 per customer. $200 issued as $825 free bets. No purchase necessary for sweepstakes. Void where prohibited. Hence, First Aid DraftKings is allowed to operate in Ohio. See terms at dkng.co/OH.
Right. Well, we are going to be discussing the great Chuck Norris here in a moment, but we're going to pause for a break. When we return, it'll be our Chuck Norris countdown. All right, we are back with more of the Bulletproof podcast, and specifically, we're going to be talking Chuck Norris. Chad, we had the big one. You mentioned it earlier. We had the big post. You mentioned it before we even started recording. July 4th, we counted down Chuck Norris's top 10 Canon movies.
Yeah, what better way to celebrate the Declaration of Independence being signed, the birth of our country, than to chat about one of the greatest action stars of all time, and that is Chuck Norris, and a guy who kind of became the Canon man. You had Charles Bronson, you had Chuck Norris, and you had Michael Dudikoff, but the one that you can't stop thinking about when you think of Canon is Chuck Norris. So when we talked about how many films had he done for Canon, how many became hits, and there were obviously a couple misses there as well. So that makes it fun. That makes the countdown exciting because you've got some that aren't as good, and usually those make for the best discussions.
Yeah. And yeah, Austin helped us out with that, as well as Will Slater from Exploding Helicopter, and of course Big Mike Leader. He wrote an epic novel himself for one of the films, and we encourage you to check out the post after you're done here with us. That, of course, bulletproofaction.com. But let's get started, guys, with the countdown. And number 10 on the list, not a surprise to me, probably not a surprise to many people. It is Hellbound, 1994. This one directed by Aaron Norris. This one, actually, Chuck's last movie with Canon, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. He technically, the first few episodes and the pilot movie for Walker, One Riot, One Ranger, were done through Canon Television. But this is, I mean, truly his last Canon film.
Yeah, and yeah, this is after, of course, the Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus split. So, like, Yoram got Chuck in the divorce settlement, I guess.
yes, and Menachem must have gotten Charlie.
Charlie
Brown. Death Wish 5.
And this one, directed by Aaron Norris. One of the big things I recently rewatched this for the first time in years, and it's fun, but I think it's not the Chuck Norris people were expecting. Would you say that's accurate, Chad Cruz?
Yeah, I mean, it really does feel like Chuck. I don't know if it's an attempt to do something different. I feel like there's a couple times throughout his Canon filmography, a couple of movies we'll talk about later, where he really attempts to go a different direction. He's not doing Braddock, he's not doing Delta Force. He's like, he's trying Firewalker or something. So this felt like something that was an attempt, but probably a miss for most people.
Mm-hmm.
I just liked that Kelvin Levels was in it, because the only thing I ever remembered him in other than this was Adventures in Babysitting, which is a freaking awesome movie in and of itself. And we get Sherry J. Wilson. You mentioned Walker. We get a little Sherry J. Wilson, Austin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she jumped from this straight into Walker with Chuck, and it was because of the great experience. They liked working together on this, so yeah, they ended up having a great long television career together. So we can't say nothing good came out of Hellbound.
There you go. Yeah, definite chemistry between the two.
Right, and we see kind of those partnerships that Chuck has with other actors. Whether it be Steve James or he works with some of the same people multiple times over his career and over this even this Canon period.
Mm-hmm. Billy Drago being another one that's Chuck, a guy Chuck seemed to like, and kept bringing him back in. Mm-hmm. And it's any time I see Billy Drago in a movie, we'll talk about him plenty today, but I light up, and I'm glad that he and Chuck had a nice working relationship.
All right, number 9, another one that really wasn't a surprise, Hitman, 1991, again, directed by Aaron Norris. I think really the standout thing here is freaking Michael Parks is in the movie, who's a scene stealer.
It is something that is a regular occurrence through, I think, most of the movies on our list here tonight, is that Canon had a good way of picking bad guys and sidekicks for Chuck. They surrounded him with fun casts, and Michael Parks is another one. He's someone who I think of him from Twin Peaks is the first thing that comes to mind for me. Him as a character, but he's really good in this. He's really slimy, and in my opinion, this movie has two great things going for it. Two Chuck high points, and that is Chuck's mullet. It's definitely the coolest hair that he has in any film, and Michael Parks.
And I when I think of Hitman, I instantly think of the sawed off over under shotgun, and like you said, the mullet. This is like pre Van Damme hard target mullet too.
I was
And
going
he's
to ask
got
you,
the
Chad,
yeah.
which mullet's better,
Now
Van Damme's or Norris?
I'm still going to go with Van Damme's mullet, but the black duster jacket with the black like long sleeve underneath it that Chuck wears in this. I mean, as a ensemble, like as a costume, that's pretty hard to beat.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that, and then Hitman, of course, they do such a good job of, I mean, Chuck's like almost ghost-like in a few scenes. Like he's just like coming out of the mist and out of the smoke. So it's such a cool scene that I can't get out of my mind. Every time I've seen Hitman, I think of Sidekicks when they spoof the scene in Sidekicks, and it's so on point in that movie. And I know he's in both movies, obviously, so he's kind of poking fun at himself, but it's just so perfect.
Yeah, there is that whole B storyline with the kid. It's like, yeah, were you getting ready for the next leg of your action career, where you do more of the family friendly Forest Warrior? Anyone?
Top Dog is there? Top
Dog, right?
Yeah.
Sidekicks, as you mentioned, and Michael Parks, Death Wish 5.
Ooh.
That's what I remember him from.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, number 8 on the list. 1988's Hero and the Terror. Do you believe I've had 2 people now, one of which is Aaron Williams, who's always listening to the Bulletproof podcast. That's his absolute favorite Chuck Norris. I had somebody else say this is their absolute favorite Chuck Norris movie. Obviously, not many people think that because it's number 8 on the list. But again, kind of a little bit of a departure from what we were used to from Chuck.
Mm-hmm. This was a very intentional departure on Chuck's part. He, during the promoting this film for Canon, he'd said many times that he was tired of critics saying he couldn't act, or that he didn't act, or that he was one note or one dimensional. So he really wanted to play a character where he could silence the critics, in his words. And whether or not he succeeded with that, I'll leave that to you guys and the listeners to decide. But this was very much a effort for Chuck to show a sensitive, vulnerable side that maybe he didn't have before. One of my favorite comments from that same sort of press cycle he talked to every local newspaper back in the day. He was really beating the drum for this movie, trying to promote it himself. He had said it was the only movie he had made that his wife liked, that he wasn't just dragging her to. And he was saying this was the movie that was going to get women to see Chuck Norris films. And this was the movie that women were going to be dragging their husbands to see, rather than the other way around. Oh. So it's again, if any of the female listeners want to,
I'm sure we have tons of them,
dozens,
and let us know if this is the movie that the Chuck Norris movie that gets them sitting down the quickest to watch it.
Yeah, the two, obviously Aaron is a male. The other person who said this was also a male. So I've not heard anything from the female audience.
No. We know that Chuck Norris's wife loves it.
And yeah, he does kind of have that more of a romantic storyline in there, which you did not obviously get in the Delta Force or in Invasion USA.
But by the end of the film, it breaks down into your usual Chuck Norris kicks a guy a couple dozen times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, he's the hero, obviously, the terror, Jack O'Halloran from Superman. I mean, he's a Kryptonian villain. I mean,
it's hard to beat that.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he is a gigantic human being for Chuck Norris to be kicking. Definitely, probably the largest opponent that I remember Chuck ever squaring up against.
I think so. And then you get Steve James in yet another sidekick role for Canon. Why don't you think Steve ever got the chance to be a star of a Canon movie? Obviously they liked his work. He was in a ton of movies, but why was he always the sidekick?
I honestly don't know. It is very unfortunate that he never got that chance, because Canon seems like the obvious place for him to do that.
Right.
And as the one movie he when he took a brief break from Canon during this period, he went to make Riverbend with Sam Furstenberg, a Canon regular, and really got to be the lead of that and shine. But that was something he made when several Canon people kind of stepped and did something away from Canon. So I'm not sure why. I don't have a good answer for why Steve James I mean, why Canon didn't give him that chance,
Right.
but why anybody didn't give him that chance. I don't know how
Yeah.
you could watch him on screen and not think this guy should rightfully, he should be up there, one of these top action stars.
And so, yeah, we get Steve James in a familiar role, but we get Billy Drago in a good guy role.
That's rare as well.
Yeah, very rare. Very rare.
Yeah. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Chuck liked Billy, so they happened to work together a few times. And yeah, anytime Billy Drago can show up and be slimy, that's great. But if he's gonna show up and be surprisingly nice, it makes watching this movie funny because I kind of expect his character to be
Right.
have something up his sleeve or have a sudden twist where he's working with the Terror or something. And how many times I've seen Hero and the Terror, I still see Billy Drago on the screen and assume he's going to do something evil at some point in the film.
I feel that way about John P. Ryan in the Delta Force 2, but we'll get to that in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Number 7 on the list. From 1986, Canon was determined to get a piece of that Indiana Jones pie.
Oh,
and
yeah.
here's one of their attempts. Firewalker, directed by J. Lee Thompson and Chad Cruz, alongside Chuck Norris, is the national treasure that is Louis Gossett Jr.
Yeah, we could do a post for Louis Gossett Jr. just like this at some point, I think, in the future, and I don't think anyone complains. So yeah, Louis Gossett Jr. as one of your top 2 leading men is just money in the bank right there, and putting him up next to Chuck Norris and having kind of like that comedy flair to it and the adventure flair to it, and you add in Melody Anderson from Flash Gordon, and like it's just it really is a fun film, and I don't think it knocked anyone's socks off as far as like box office wise, or I don't know if anyone's choosing this movie to be their favorite Chuck Norris film because it is slightly different from his other films, but it's just a load of fun.
Yeah, it's one that every time I watch it, I like it more.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely grown on me over the years.
This is a movie that, well, I think Canon, even if I have one of their old press kits for this movie, where they would send out the photos and the press notes and information to journalists who were reviewing it, so they'd have something to work from, and hopefully they'd be enticed to go see a review critic screening and get coverage for the film. But the press release begins Chuck Norris in a comedy ? And then it proceeds into the description of Firewalker. And when your official company press release, when the company itself seems surprised to see Chuck Norris in a comedy, I think that kind of frames where Chuck Norris was at this point in his career. How this movie sort of came to Canon is kind of funny to me. The screenwriter, Robert Cosnell, who at least maybe there were other credited screenwriters by the time it came out, but he was basically had sent this in as a spec script because Indiana Jones movies and that sort of adventure movie was very popular at the time, with the Romancing the Stone and the Quatermain movies, the Indiana Jones movies, all sort of being topping the box office, doing very well. So he basically wrote a script in that style, a spec script, thinking that this isn't anything that anybody's going to make, but somebody might read it and give me a job. And he had basically been hoping to get one of the writer's jobs on Number One with a Bullet, which was another Canon movie that went through so many different writers, so many different stars. By the time it came out, it was kind of forgotten about, but for a while, Canon was really leaning to that project. But anyways, the script was laying somewhere on a desk or on a coffee table in one of the Canon offices, and when Chuck was in there and sort of looking for his next project, and he saw it and picked it up and started flipping through it, and Chuck loved it. And so they called up the screenwriter and said, hey, we're going to buy your script. And he's confused because he's like, oh, did I get the job? Did I get the one I was applying for? Did I to write on Number One of the Bullet? And they said, no, we are buying the sample script you sent us, and we're going to make it. Chuck Norris is going to star in it. And it's just this was a script that wasn't really meant for public consumption, I guess. But because Chuck liked it, and he decided that this was going to be his next movie. and I think it's fun. It's got some very fun things in it. Melody Anderson is great. You have a great relationship with Lou Gossett Jr. They've got a very good repertoire in there, and Sean Rhys Davies is in it.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't have an Indiana Jones ripoff without him.
No. And even if he needs to only show up for 5 minutes like he does in this. And this was actually the first of a 3-movie contract that Canon signed with Lou Gossett Jr. And those other 2 movies never came to be.
Oh boy.
He did Firewalker. He filled the first one in his contract, and the second movie was something that was announced called The White Slave, and it was Lou Gossett Jr. basically as a detective investigating basically a slave trade, a sex trade ring. But that never came to be, and there was never any third movie discussed that I could ever find.
Well, I think he was supposed to be Doc in a G.I. Joe movie, but that may have been just something I made up for the website.
Yeah. That sounds wonderful, by the way.
And what about the villain? Number 1, you name him El Coyote, and then number 2, you get Sonny Landham to play him, and that's terrifying, Chad Cruz. Absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be terrified of him on screen and off screen, so it works double for you.
Yeah, he is a frightening dude. Even in like very kind of like silly cliche costumes that he wears in this movie, he still manages to be intimidating while dressed like a Lone Ranger villain. But I mean, I was just thinking that I think of this movie and I think of the bullets ricocheting and Chuck never being able to shoot his guy, and I still laugh thinking about that. That's one of my favorite jokes in this film that recurs throughout it.
Yeah, it's like Chuck was having a good time with this, and now that you've told us the story, like he just was into this script to begin with, it makes sense that he was having such a good time with it.
Yeah, and we get him they get to have him in disguise, and he gets to do some
makes the goofy. They're taking the pictures with he's making goofy faces. Like where else do you see that on a Chuck Norris movie?
Right,
nowhere.
And Austin mentioned it earlier. Canon did such a good job when it came to Chuck Norris films because they flood these films with like likable actors and likable characters. And, a scene doesn't go by where you don't recognize and enjoy one of the actors in the scene. So it's hard to dislike the movie that much when, every other scene has Louis Gossett Jr. or John Rhys Davies or something like that in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good cast in this one for something that again was a script that was written that was not really meant to ever be made into a movie.
That's one of like maybe the first Chuck Norris facts is he can make a movie that's not even supposed to be made.
There you go. That's a very true Chuck Norris fact.
I mean, our the next film on our list might be the very first the multiverse film,
right? Yes, I think
timeline.
Canon exposed the multiverse long ago because we were talking about number 6. It's Braddock Missing in Action 3 from 1988. And this one, Austin, they just said, screw what happened in the first 2 movies. We're making up a new story for Braddock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Missing in Action 3 is a lot of fun. He's got some of the best, one of my favorite Chuck Norris firearms this side of his rocket launching bike from Delta Force. He's got that. I mean, I'm not a guy who can name every gun, but it's got the knife, the bayonet on the end, and it can shoot grenades, and it's a machine gun, and there seems to be like he never runs out of bullets or shells or anything in either one of them. It's definitely one of the coolest video game style weapons that Chuck Norris ever got to play with.
It's like the Swiss Army knife of guns. It has everything in it, everything you need.
Mm-hmm. And it's got the one of Canon's, actually probably the actor that appeared in more Canon, more Golden Globus productions than any other, Yehuda Afroni, who is Israeli actor who plays the priest in the in the film, and he I mean, you see him everywhere in Canon movies, but He's in Delta Force. He's in the Hercules movies. He's in he's somebody who, as a Canon fan, what's the image you see of Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the screen
Yes.
that everybody uses online, the meme? That's he's the guy that makes me do that when I'm watching Canon films.
Did he work with Menachem like before Menachem came to America?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
You go back all the way back to the beginning. He was working with Menachem from really when Menachem started.
That makes sense then.
Mhm.
Loyalty. That's good. Kia Leong is General Kwok here. But yeah, like we mentioned, Braddock Chad has a wife. He has a kid. This was never mentioned. And the timeline contradicts what we saw in the first two movies. But like you said, it's the multiverse.
It is. I think that's the only explanation for it. But you know what? It even saying all that, it's still a really cool movie. The action sequences are still really good. You get like maximum Chuck Norris in it, tortures and jumping out of planes and cool ass weapons. It's. I mean, I don't know if they just decided like, okay, after, I don't want to say debacle, but after Missing in Action 1 and 2 kind of did the old flip flop. Like if they were just going to change it up and do something different, I don't get it. But yeah, it still works as a film.
It does.
And the ending, not to spoil too much, but the finale of Missing in Action 3 is pretty fantastic. With I just think that the Jeep or the truckload full of rescued orphans rumbling as like helicopters are chasing it, and Chuck trying to get across the border. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, so if you can get by the alternate timeline, it's a great film. If you're going to get caught up with that, you'll probably hate it. But
yeah, just don't do like a 3-movie.
Yeah,
you don't like splurge and watch all 3 together.
Because you might give yourself a headache.
Yes, it's not good for your eyes.
No. All right, number 5, Delta Force 2, The Colombian Connection. Chad, you want to guess who this one was directed by?
Oh man, Chuck Norris film from Canon. I'm gonna go with Aaron Norris.
You got it. You got it, man. This one though, this was not originally supposed to be a Delta Force movie. Is that correct, Austin?
Delta Force, the Delta Force sequels are one of the most convoluted. Canon had so many different plans on how to follow up the first Delta Force movie. You had Delta Force, you had the Delta Force 2 originally that was going to be Norris and Lee Marvin again, and Michael Winner was directing, and that fell apart pretty quick because Marvin died before they could make it. There was briefly a version when Chuck was looking in other directions where they had Michael Dudikoff and Steve James starring in a version called Spitfire, which Albert Pune was going to direct, and I'm sure would have been absolutely insane.
Oh boy.
Which never came to be. But I would have loved to have seen that. It was a kind of a similar plot to this, as sort of the two of them stopping an international like drug lord. But that didn't happen. We had America's Red Army, which was another version of Delta Force 2 that was planned, and it would have been Scott McCoy and his Delta Force teammates teaming up with the USSR, the Soviet Union's version of the Delta Force. And Chuck would have learned, when he was talking about making that, he was going to learn Russian, and there were going to be scenes where Chuck Norris would be speaking Russian. So we may have saved ourselves from having to see a movie that Chuck Norris speaking in a foreign language with subtitles for a large part of it.
If people thought that Kevin Costner learning the English accent was bad, you should hear Chuck with the Russian dialect.
Yeah, I don't know if Chuck's speaking Russian, if we could have had that post on 4th of July. It may have ruined his American hero status. I don't know.
I could have dubbed it for him.
I would have just hoped that maybe like that would have been right around the time that maybe they could have gotten Dolph to do it. This would have been right post Rocky, just done Masters for him. Maybe we would have had a team up of Dolph Lundgren and Chuck Norris working together in a Delta Force 2. But This is the Delta Force we finally got. And I like it. This is the one I picked to write about for this ranking article.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think again, it's kind of like with Braddock. If you just take it for what it is and don't try to compare it to the movie that came before it, it's a fun movie. If you're not saying like, where's Steve James? Where's the music from the first one? Obviously, you could say where's Lee Marvin, but you'll get the answer to that, unfortunately, pretty quickly. But we do get Billy Drago in the role he's meant to be in as the main villain, a drug lord, and that scene with the airplane scene at the beginning, just amazing. Just that's like that will like that hooks you right away.
And John P. Ryan's great line, "Always the hard way," right there. This is another one where the flip flop. You mentioned Billy Drago in a good guy role, and this is John P. Ryan playing a good guy, and he, even as a good guy, he scares me.
Yeah. I was waiting for him to like. It was all a setup. He's evil, but he just kind of takes over the Robert Vaughn role from the first one. It's like, hey, this is what you got to do. But yeah, he is. I know you mentioned we're going to go off Chuck Norris here for a moment, but he was obviously the villain in Death Wish 4. For Canon fans know this, but his character never had an actual name. How bizarre is that?
No, that is true. You never get what his character's real name is. You just get, I think it's Mr. White, if I remember.
Mr. White, yes.
Yeah.
I think Nathan White.
Nathan White, that's correct. Yeah, it's never revealed because even in the screenplays, the two different versions that I've read, he's just referred to as Nathan White, even after he's revealed he's not
imposter, right?
Ridiculous. Right, the script refers to him even as he's dying as Nathan White.
There's also the big limo scene where the limo is driving through the jungle in this one, and I think I've seen that. I don't remember what movie I was watching, but it was one of those where they obviously took stock footage from this film and plugged it in. It was probably a Jim Wynorski film because he was pretty good for doing that.
I think Delta Force 2, first lesson, get Chuck Norris. Second lesson, where the hell is Aaron Norris? Next lesson, Billy Drago is a bad guy. And then, school's out.
Yeah. That's all you need. It's all you need.
Wind it up and let it go.
All right. Number 4 on the list. It is Missing in Action 2, the beginning. Of course, Jed, you mentioned this earlier, the flip-flop. This was supposed to be just Missing in Action, but they decided to hold off and make this a prequel. And this is one of the first times I remember in my young days hearing the word prequel. I think the only other one would have been Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But this one directed by Lance Houle, Austin.
Mm-hmm. So yes, this was something that ended up being the way the Missing in Action movies came out ended up being a very nice accidental, great thing for Canon. It looks like a great move in hindsight, but it all just happened that way kind of because it had to. This is Missing Action 2 is a movie that at the time Canon had a first look deal with Warner Brothers, and they were shooting Missing in Action 2. They had rough cuts together. Before finishing Missing in Action 2, they had already decided that they wanted to do a sequel. And so they had called up screenwriter James Brunner, who had written another movie called Missing in Action that Chuck had brought to the company. A very funny, weird story there. But he called him down and he was able to kind of rewrite his Missing in Action script as what became ultimately the Missing in Action we know. But while he was down there, while they were finishing up shooting this, they also had him basically write a trailer for a sequel. And they were kind of, as they had shooting little bits of basically, I'm still like, now my brain is breaking still. This is something I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, but trying to put this together. They had him write a sequel to Missing in Action 2, which was actually, they were shooting this footage for what would eventually go into Missing in Action 1, but as a sequel to Missing in Action 2, and just a very, so this ultimately they never used that footage. That trailer was never released, or even James Brunner doesn't know what became of it, or even if they finished cutting it together. But anyways, they took the script that he had already written and he and Chuck had taken to Canon, and they went and shot it pretty much back to back with what became Missing in Action 2 at the beginning. They shot Missing in Action. Warner Brothers saw Missing in Action 2, didn't really care for it, and said no. And then Canon realized that the first Missing in Action, as evidenced by the rankings here, is the better of the two movies. And because the Warner Brothers had already passed on a Missing in Action movie, they went ahead and released the better one themselves, and it became a #1 hit for them. So it was just a very, very weird way of falling backwards into a #1 movie at the box office. And
because that wasn't that and Breakin' were the two big.
Yes, those were their two big, even for all the movies Canon made and all the history they had after this, their two most profitable films that they had done. They both came in 1984 and both came pretty unexpectedly. But yes, Missing in Action 2, the beginning, they finally went and ended up releasing it after Missing in Action, which was supposed to be the sequel. So that's how it got the very funny title, Missing in Action 2, The Beginning. And I wonder how confused people were. Because I only really have critics' reviews, newspaper reviews, who these guys clearly got the press notes and everything. So they knew what the deal was with this being a prequel, and they had to explain to them. But I am sure that people had seen Missing in Action, a few months earlier. All the people that made it into a #1 hit went to see the sequel and were like, what the heck is going on here with the timeline? We're confused by the Braddock timeline. Like, I'm trying to imagine people who went to see this in the spring of 1985.
Just months apart. Yeah.
Canon, but how quickly that swap happened. I actually have, when this goes up, I'll take up some pictures and post them around. But the press kits for Missing in Action, which are actually the press notes for Missing in Action 2, but with an action note low. So Canon actually went and printed marketing materials for with this movie as the first film, and then decided to reprint them when they swapped everything. My brain hurts, guys.
Well, thankfully they reprinted them, and then they didn't just release them, because printing materials can be expensive.
Yes,
I could see Canon just reusing the same materials. Just send it to them, whatever.
Just writing in Sharpie a 2, like on the front of each the cover.
Yeah, and again, I will agree that what is Missing in Action is the better movie, but I don't think this one's too bad, Chad. I kind of like the whole it's the whole thing. He's in the POW camp, and you got Soon Tek-O, who's a tremendous villain. Toru Tanaka's in this too, I believe.
Of course.
The evil ninja from Ninja 3 is in there as well as one of the underlings. And you got Stephen Williams as kind of the traitor. He's kind of like, let's just go along with what they say so we can get out of here, and kind of selling out his fellow American soldiers.
Yeah, I think you get some of those POW movies were coming out in the early 80s, mid 80s. And this kind of has a lot of those similar themes to it. But with Chuck Norris. So he's kind of, you just insert Chuck Norris into any film and he still plays Chuck Norris, but it's still a cool film, and the scenes are made that much better for him being there. But you also get, the cool fight at the end with Soon Tek-Ho, where he did you really think at any point that Chuck was going to lose? No. He does get hit a couple of times though. But in the end,
plus it's the prequel, so he's alive.
Well, obviously, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this is by no means a bad Chuck Norris movie. I think it's really solid. If you're going to launch an action hero or an action franchise, or really Chuck Norris into this next level of action stardom, what became the actual missing in action, first missing in action movie is just a better way to launch a hero, rather than one who's getting tortured for half the movie, I guess.
Well, who knew they were doing an origin film, but they did one. It's
right.
What marvelous foresight.
Canon, again, is just ahead of the times.
Ahead of the time, 30 years ahead of the time.
Rat in the bag, though. I mean, that's
some excellent torturing. We've got some torture scenes in action films is one of my favorite little things to go to. Whether it's electrocution or yes, yeah, thank you, electrocution or
you watched that Showdown in Little Tokyo scene on a
yes, so many times. Pop those shirts off and start zapping people. But and for whatever reason, it always seems like Asian bad guys do the best torture scenes. So, and this is a good one.
All right. Well, hopefully we haven't totally confused ourselves or our listeners, because number 3 on the list is the real Missing in Action, 1984, the what became the first film, directed by Joe Zito. And question I have for you is, and I've heard this, I hope I didn't read it in your book, and I'm going to just ask you if what I read in your book is right. But the Spider-Man cartoon that Braddock's watching, did Canon have that in there because they had the Spider-Man deal at that point?
And Missing in Action, that would have predated the Spider-Man deal.
Okay,
so
there you go.
Was...
That's bullcrap.
Some idiot wrote that somewhere.
You want the true information, pick up the Canon Film Guide. But yeah, that's what I had heard, was that the reason you had that in there was because
that would have been a premonition at that point.
Okay, well there you go. Good. Then, as we've said, Canon was ahead of the game. But yeah, this one's great. M. Emmett Walsh as Jack Tucker. And again, we've talked about it, surrounding Chuck with wonderful supporting characters. And he's one of my favorites. I mean, we see him at a whorehouse. He's kind of a deadbeat, and he's a wonderful. He kind of reminds me of Chad Cruz, I think.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very great compliment.
He's just this sort of very fun character who is really there to fill a lot of needs to move Chuck Norris's action forward. And then Walsh kind of just it really helps push Chuck in a way that keeps the movie moving.
Yeah, and he's very reluctant to help, but he always does the right thing. Goes above and beyond too before it's all said and done. So great character. You also have James Hong, who's wonderful. We just talked about him a few episodes ago when we talked Big Trouble in Little China, Chad, and he's an evil General Tran in this one.
Yeah, he's in so many movies, so many films, TV shows, and another guy who plays a great bad guy, and also you can lovingly enjoy his roles as a good guy, but in this film, you're either Chuck Norris or you're a bad guy. He's coming after you.
Pretty much. Pretty much. And then that big dramatic ending. That's something always. The helicopter comes in, and he comes in with that's pretty. That's just like F you.
Yeah.
I knew I was right all along, and here's the damn proof of it. It's an amazing ending. I love that ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes you want to see a sequel/prequel a few months later.
Why is he so pissed off at these guys? You'll find out in the prequel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You will find out. So yeah, it all makes sense. And maybe that's why I liked the ending even more after I saw the second one.
Maybe. And then you know what? Stay tuned for a third one where we change things up a bit, but he's still not happy.
No, he is definitely not. All right, number 2 on the list, and again, number 1, number 2, I think we knew going in it was going to be one of these. Number 2 is the Delta Force, 1986. And is there anything more canon than when Menachem Golan himself is the director, Austin?
No, there is not. Menachem Golan had a very, very varied, very eclectic group of films that he had directed for Canon, but they're all unique. You have The Apple, you have Over the Brooklyn Bridge, you have the Delta Force, you have Over the Top. these just wonderfully crazy movies. Enter the Ninja.
Enter the Ninja, I was going to
Yes,
say, yeah.
this is a man who directed a sci-fi disco Bible-themed musical, a Franco Nero as a Texan ninja. You have the Delta Force, which has more Oscar winners in it than any other Canon film, I'm sure.
And they should have won an extra one for this one, if you ask me.
Oh, I mean, at least for the score.
Right.
Gosh, Alan Silvestri following up Back to the Future with the Delta Force score.
And of course, an arm wrestling movie. So yeah, he could do it all as a director. We talked about it. Lee Marvin, this is his final film. He's got that. I'll always remember him just when they get the order, take him down. It's just, he's awesome. I mean, Lee Marvin was a man's man. But is it true? Was that supposed to be Charles Bronson?
It was originally pre-sold as a Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson movie. Canon just did not get enough of the advance sales to pay both of their salaries. That's what happened there.
That's insane. That is insane to think about, because I think if you can go back in time, that would change.
Yeah.
If people would be like, whoa, wait, because that would be monumental. But at the same time, would the entire universe collapse on itself? What do you say, Chad?
I think we've already talked about multiverses and alternate universes and stuff like that. I don't know what would happen to our universe had those two shared the screen. And I fear for the villains, how much can these guys take? They can't take Bronson.
That's true too. The movie would have been possibly 10 minutes long.
It's just people laughing at the bad guys. Like, oh yeah, you're going to blow up this plane. Yeah.
It's like, they're like, yeah, they just get on like, hey, we're coming. Oh, well, never mind then. We'll just let everybody go. We're going back home.
And Chuck had the awesome motorcycle. What would Charles Bronson have had?
Yeah.
He could have had something even cooler.
Oh, I'm sure it would have been, like a
mini tank of some sort. Maybe.
I was gonna say like a convertible Cadillac with like a mini gun like right on the hood or something. Something that's a 65-year-old, 66, whatever or Charles Bronson was at this point. Like what I could have seen him driving in real life, minus the weaponry.
I think that we didn't deserve it and we didn't get it, but Lee Marvin is so amazing in the role, and I think that he's old enough to like, I don't know. If I saw Charles Bronson and Chuck together, I think like, okay, who's in charge here? But Lee Marvin is always in charge. Always.
Right.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. The white hair made him seem more of the elder statesman of the military world.
Yeah, when they changed it out, when it wasn't going to be Charles Bronson anymore, they actually had to rewrite it a bit because Lee's health was already pretty bad at this point, but he wasn't nearly as spry, I guess, as Charles Bronson, and it's just funny to think that any actor replacement would be considered less spry than 65-year-old Charles Bronson at this point, but they had to remove some of the characters like actual like running about and such because Lee couldn't do that at this time.
Now maybe you can answer
60
this.
60 was the new 40 for Bronson. I mean, he was again ahead of their time. This Canon and everybody involved.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe you can answer this, Austin. I heard that Charles Bronson was going to be Lincoln Hawk in Over the Top. Is that not right?
Well, that's news to me.
That would have been perfect.
That is a scoop that I am very interested in hearing your sources. You gotta send those over to me.
It's called Out His Ass. That's his source.
If I do, guys, if you want to, if this movie would have rocked your world, I want to direct you to a movie that Menachem announced. I believe I am in the impression that he announced in a panic at the American film market in 1988. This is a movie. This is a time 1988 was not a good time for Canon. This would have been after the triple flops of Over the Top, Master Universe, and Superman 4 in 87, all sort of, and then them also just being in crazy massive debt. It was a bad time for Canon. They needed money, but he announced at AFM that year that Canon was working on a movie called The Deadly Three. Do you want to guess who that Deadly Three was going to comprise. I will give you a hint that it was Canon's 3 biggest stars at the time.
Well, yeah, I was going to say it has to be Norris, Bronson, and Duty.
That is correct.
Oh my.
Yeah, they would have, from what little I know about it, is that the Bronson and Norris would have been 2 agents from the DEA and the CIA who enlist a Green Beret, played by Dudikoff, to help them again take down a drug ring, because that's kind of the go-to plot for Canon when you didn't know what exactly you needed your heroes to do. Just have them take down a drug ring. But yeah, that obviously went nowhere, but I do love the mentions of it, and I try to imagine what the Deadly Three might have looked like.
I think you just sent me into depression.
Yeah, we don't deserve things like that.
It's that dream that we've all had so many times over the years, and then you hear how close we were to actually getting it, and you're like, no, why?
As with Canon, like I think a lot of things were probably just ideas that Menachem had while he was like, somebody else was speaking during a panel.
Yeah.
Just like these like fever dreams that he just kind of starts spitting out, because that one didn't get a lot of many other mentions past that. So again, if they couldn't pay both of their salaries for the Delta Force, I don't know how they could pay all 3 of those guys in a movie when they were even in worse financial shape.
Good point. All right, well, if you, by process of elimination, have not figured it out, the number 1 movie, and rightfully so, 1985's Invasion USA. This one again directed by Joe Zito, and we've got the great Richard Lynch as our main villain. But this thing has got more villains than you can count. I mean, this thing is they're invading the USA, Austin.
Mm-hmm. How dare they?
Mm-hmm.
At Christmas time.
Oh my God. How un-American.
How could you invade the USA knowing Chuck Norris lives here?
How could you just think about them invading like near a Walmart on Black Friday? That's instant death.
They just get trampled by shoppers, let alone Chuck Norris.
Beaten with 75-inch plasma TVs.
Yeah. I mean, Invasion USA is my favorite, easily my favorite of Chuck Norris's movies, and definitely in my top 5 all of the Canon films.
Oh yeah, I would agree.
It's so much fun, and it's just such a high ratio of just crazy stuff happening, and Chuck Norris like coming in to blow it up or shoot it up or kick it through something. And I mean, it's got great one-liners. There's very little plot to get in the way. It's
who needs it?
No, it's just a whole lot of fun. And again, any Chuck Norris movie, I feel like the more it sticks to the action and the fun parts of it, like that stuff, the better it's going to be. And Invasion USA barely bothers with anything else. And when it does, when Chuck Norris isn't on screen, that usually means the plot is focusing on Richard Lynch, who is, again, you have like Billy Drago and Michael Parks and Jack O'Halloran, just one of these great bad guy actors of the day.
Yeah, and I think, the reason this one is number 1 is it's just Chuck. The spotlight is firmly on Chuck. Yeah. It's not, an ensemble cast like with the Delta Force. And it's, obviously missing in action. It's more realistic because at least there is Vietnam attached to it. And there is some sorrow and it's somber. But that one's a little bit more somber because you've got these poor POWs involved. But here it's just Chuck kicking bad guy ass all the whole movie. And I know, Chad, it also has one of your all-time favorite characters, bit players, Mr. John Eagle.
My God, what an amazing name. You don't need an ensemble cast when you have a character named John Eagle.
And Chuck Norris all in denim.
And Chuck Norris wearing like a open front denim vest. My God, how this probably had 98% of the audience were women, right?
Oh, I would
Can you
think,
confirm
except
that?
for Chuck's wife, apparently. She didn't want to go see this.
I think they just became impregnated by watching it, Chad.
They probably did. And didn't the character who played, or the actor who played John Eagle, just pass away?
Oh, I missed that if he did. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I'm clicking, must find.
Oh,
I did. Oh,
How about
no,
the armadillos?
I was way off. Never mind.
Oh.
Sorry.
The armadillo. Here's a question. I mean, I've probably watched Invasion USA probably a few times in the last few months, just for various reasons. So it's very fresh on my mind. But something that strikes me as funny, I just noticed the most recent time watching this, is John Eagle runs a airboat rental place and a like food shack. You see. Do you think John Eagle rented out those airboats that Richard Lynch and his gang used to then drive out and kill him?
Capitalism.
I wonder if did poor John Eagle rent these airboats to his own killers? But then again, also who rents airboats to that, a heavily armed multinational terrorist organization?
Well, do you think that John Eagle fears any man?
That's true. That's true.
He's not Sonny Landham.
That's true. I don't know.
One of the
I feel
things,
like if someone comes knocking on your door to rent an airboat, you rent it out. You can't just hold those.
The movie does have the best, one of the. Okay, I will say that. I will say it's second best. And you guys, I will also go to you as the action experts. One of the best hero introductions, I think, when we first see Arnold in Commando. That's probably the best action movie hero introductions. But this one's got to be close, because you first see Chuck Norris's character riding on the airboat with his unbuttoned denim vest. His hair and like chest hair just blowing in the wind, like very dramatic music playing. And the shot goes on, and it's just like, you know that guy is going to save the USA from being invaded. From that second, that's who the hero is. It's just such a great way to introduce a just qualified badass like that.
Yeah, I think that
I can't argue it.
It's got a very spaghetti Western feel to it, where you introduce the character just kind of like not doing anything. He's just like walking, but he looks super cool doing it. And you're like, oh, this guy must be the hero. Look how cool he looks. Look at his hat, or look at his jacket. But yeah, it feels like if you watch Commando and Invasion USA, you would immediately go enlist for the Marine Corps.
This is why Chad's a former military man.
Yes.
One of the things I always love about this is I watched this with the commentary track on, and one of the stories in there was when Menachem was watching a screening of Invasion USA and the armadillo came up. For whatever reason, when that armadillo was there, Menachem turned to whoever was sitting next to him and said, "This is why Joe Zito's a great director." I don't know. I just love that. I don't know how he made that connection, but bless you, Menachem Golan.
Yeah, that's Canon in a nutshell there. That definitely gives you a glimpse into the mind of the man that ran that company.
Oh, he's a personal hero. He's a personal hero of mine. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. The top 10 Chuck Norris Canon movies. Again, if you want to read more about it, you can check out bulletproofaction.com and search for Chuck. You can go to our collections on the side where you can see everything we've ever done about Chuck. And we've done a lot of Chuck Norris content over the years, Chad.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's too much. I mean, you'd have to
50
times a day to read them all.
That's fine. They can keep coming back every day and clicking to their heart's content. Austin, any final words about Chuck and his years at Canon?
I would say that I think it worked out pretty darn well for Chuck. It really kind of took him from that sort of a C-level, low-budget martial arts guy to somebody who was a sort of box office draw, but it set him up for that third act of his career as Walker. he was somebody who was recognizable enough, but also who, all the suburban dads could get could get behind watching on CBS every week.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I was going to say, he is, I don't think anybody benefited from being in Canon films more than Chuck Norris. Like you said, it just basically set him up for life at that point, because I'm sure he's still getting paychecks for Walker, Texas Ranger, because it's probably on right now. It's on
I'm
right
sure.
now.
Guaranteed.
So,
yeah.
Chad?
Yeah, I mean, you look at pre-Canon Chuck and then post-Canon Chuck, and I think that, absent Walker, you would think that it didn't help his career, but having Walker be such a kind of just to me, like when you think of Chuck Norris, you think of Walker, Texas Ranger, and then secondary to that is Braddock or Scott McCoy or whatever. You got Matt Hunter, but for most people, they're probably thinking of Walker. So I would say that Canon it was a massive success for Chuck Norris, and I would say for me personally, massive fan of Chuck Norris, but also my 8-year-old son studied Chuck Norris karate system.
Oh,
so,
wow.
I'm a big Chuck fan.
I can't wait till he kicks your ass.
He's getting closer every day.
And I would say that these movies are definitely where at least the Chuck Norris, the facts, the jokes, like those are rooted. Those have to be rooted in roles like Invasion USA and Delta Force and things like that.
When you have one man who's able to take out an entire terrorist army, that's pretty much laying the groundwork for those jokes. Absolutely. All right, guys, we are going to take a quick break, and then we will come back and wrap things up here on the Bulletproof Podcast. Okay, almost done with this episode of the Bulletproof Podcast. Again, want to thank Austin Trunick for joining us, and I want to encourage you to follow us on social media at Bulletproof Pod on Twitter and at Bulletproof Action on Instagram and Facebook. And Austin, how can our fans connect with you on social media?
I am at Canon Film Guide on Twitter and Facebook, and I'm posting on there pretty much every day. It's a great place. I love those places as an outlet to share stuff that I have discovered since the books have been published and continue research, or just things that I didn't have room for. My Canon collection is many, many, many boxes stacked up in my closets, and I like to just be able to snap pictures and scan things and post them and share weird stories as I find them. Absolutely.
A great follow. One of my favorites to follow on Twitter, because you're always sharing something interesting and new about Canon. So that, and of course, pick up the Canon Film Guide. Both Volume 1 and 2 are now available. Again, Amazon, Bear Manor Media, or your local bookstore if you'd like to support your local retail. And I'm sure you're probably already working on Volume 3. Is that an accurate statement?
That is correct. My nose has been at the grindstone for a while now, but it's a long ways off. There's a lot of work to be done in this one, but I'm excited. It's got some fun stuff that beyond just getting to cover some of the odd direct-to-video action that they did in the early 90s and the rise of Van Damme at Canon.
Yes.
I'm having a lot of fun writing about all of the unmade Canon movies. A large part of the book will be dedicated to trying to put together what the 150 plus Canon movies that Canon announced but just never funded, never ended up making, what they might have looked like had they actually gone through. And that includes many Chuck Norris movies, many Michael Dudikoff movies, a handful of crazy sounding Bronsons. So I'm having a lot of fun, especially with working on that part.
Well, and Volume 2 is so big, it might take everybody that long before they even can think about like when Volume 3 is coming out. So
yeah, it's a doorstop. It is a massive doorstop level book.
All right, Chad. Well, next time here on the Bulletproof Podcast, we're going to keep this Canon train rolling, because we are going to be celebrating the 35th anniversary of Masters of the Universe.
For a moment, I thought you were going to say Runaway Train
no.
with Canon, but that would have been fun. But yeah, 35th anniversary Masters of the Universe, a movie that you and I both love. And I know that we'll have a special guest on that podcast as well. And I don't know if anyone loves it as much as he does.
Yeah, who better to talk about a movie based on a toy line than our own friend from Figures Toy Company, Chris DiPetrillo, the Toy Man, will be back here on the podcast to talk Masters of the Universe. And yeah, I cannot wait. I cannot wait to besmirch the name of Orko.
Oh, by
for
God,
at least an hour.
How dare you? And I want to give one last question to Austin before we lose him.
Oh, fire away.
Okay, so we have Chris DiPetrillo, the Toy Man with FiguresToyCompany.com. We've been pitching over the last few years that we've known Toy Man a line of action figures that are just kind of dedicated to these characters who, Paul Kersey, the guys who didn't get the action figures that we so desired as kids. If you could make, let's just say 3 action figures, or let's go 5. Ooh. From your Canon love, from all your years of watching and following Canon films, who would you make?
Oh boy. Well, okay. So I mean, we need a Steve James character or toy, obviously, and I've got to go with his American Ninja character,
Curtis Jackson. Oh,
that's
yeah,
right. That's right. I mean, you would need to have those. The 2 swords that
giant knives.
That just tuck into a compartment that you just don't know where it would go in his vest. But I'll leave that to the toy designer to figure out.
A removable vest, a vest that you could take off easily.
Yes, and you can fit swords under it without it looking anything other than skin tight as it does in the movie. Oh boy, I would say a Sho Kosugi, but even better would be the silver mask demon ninja from Revenge. That would be such a cool looking toy. But other characters, I mean, Paul Kersey is somebody you would need. I would really hope for I would prefer a slightly later in the Death Wish series like Paul Kersey, like a Death Wish 4 when you've got the very white, or even Death Wish 3 when he's got that kind of like streak of like white in his hair.
Yeah, a little salt and pepper look, yeah.
But he would, in either movie, I guess you could give him the rocket launcher, grenade launcher. That would have to be the accessory that would go with it. I mean, this isn't action here, but I would love a Mr. Boogaloo from the Apple. I think that would be a fun. You'd have to have one of the fabric capes that you had on the old like Darth Vader figures. And then oh gosh, this is tough. Again, I feel like there's probably plenty. Somebody has to have done some Van Damme figures at some point that would have worked. But is there a Chong Li figure? That would be
mama,
would be cool.
That would be good.
It would take a lot of plastic. That would be an expensive figure to produce.
Yeah, would it be too top heavy? Would it be able to stand with those pecs?
You would have to have, the little toggle on the back that moved the pecs, I think.
Yeah, you just like press the button. I mean, I don't remember any of my toys in the 80s being able to stand on their own, so
that's true.
I wouldn't mind if I had to prop Chong Li up against a soda can or something to be able to play with them.
Just imagine a Kumite box set of like 5 figures. That would be cool. Unbelievable.
Yeah, come on, Toy Man. What the hell? We've been asking you for this. We keep bringing you on the show. Oh,
so many good ideas here. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, we're just trying to give you money, and all you're doing is nothing, basically. I hope you're listening to this, Toy Man. I'm sorry. I'll save this for our next episode when we talk with him. And
I hope you just open it with it harassing him, though.
It's what I do best sometimes on this show. So may as well go with my strengths. All right. Thanks again, Austin, for joining us and for your time. We'll let you get back to work on Volume 3 because I'm sure you'll be busy doing that. Chad, I guess thank you as well.
Yeah,
it's always a pleasure to speak to you, I guess. All right. And of course, the most important thanks is for those of you listening. Thank you. And as always, stay tuned for more of the Bulletproof Podcast.
listening to the Geekscape Network.